You are surrounded, not by enemies you can see, but by actors you trust. You laugh with them, you open up to them, you let them into your inner world, believing that time has tested them, that years have proven their loyalty. But what if I told you that time does not reveal character? It conceals it. Time gives people rehearsal. It gives them space to refine the mask, to study your reactions, to mirror your values, to become exactly who you need them to be, until you are fully disarmed. A liar can lie for a day. A manipulator can lie for a decade. But a true predator can lie for a lifetime. And that is where you've been making your first mistake. You've been watching the performance instead of studying the glitches. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. He saw humans stripped of morality, stripped of illusion, reduced to instinct. And he wrote something most people still aren't ready to accept. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience who you really are. Why? Because people don't reveal themselves when things are easy. They reveal themselves in fractures, in pressure, in moments so small you almost miss them. You are not living in reality. You are living in a theater. Every day, people step into roles. Your boss, your partner, your closest friend. They deliver lines, maintain expressions, follow scripts that have been perfected over years of social survival. And understand this clearly, most of it is not evil. It's necessary. If everyone spoke their raw thoughts, society would collapse before noon. But there is a darker layer beneath that surface. There are those who are not acting to survive, but to hunt. They study you, they adapt to you, they become your ideal reflection. Not because they care, but because it gives them access, influence, control. To them, you are not a person. You are a resource, a source of validation, attention, opportunity, power. And the most dangerous part? They don't look dangerous. They are often the most charming person in the room. Which means if you rely on time, on words, on surface behavior, you will never see them coming. So today, we do something different. We don't listen. We observe. We isolate 3 specific moments, 3 psychological tripwires that force the mask to crack, not over years, not over months, in seconds. Moments so subtle that most people ignore them. Moments where the real person leaks through before the performance can recover. This is not intuition. This is precision. This is not self-help. This is surgery. But be warned, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You may realize that someone you trust has been performing for years. You may realize that the person closest to you is a stranger. And the third moment we're going to uncover, that one doesn't just reveal character, it exposes the predator. So ask yourself this before we begin. Are you ready to stop watching the act and start seeing the truth? Let's begin the surgery. Number 1. The micro-denial, the boundary test. It looks harmless, almost insignificant. A small request, a trivial favor. Something so minor that saying no feels unnecessary. Can you grab me a coffee? Can we switch plans? Can I use your charger? And this is exactly why you keep missing it. Because you think the test is about the request. It's not. It's about what happens when you refuse. Most people have been conditioned to comply, to smile, to say yes, to avoid friction at all costs. You've been taught that being agreeable makes you likable. But in the world of power, agreeability is submission. And there are people who are constantly scanning for that. They don't ask to connect. They ask to measure control. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that human behavior is not driven by logic, but by power dynamics. Beneath politeness, beneath charm, beneath social masks, there is always one question. Can I control you? So when someone makes a small request, what they are really doing is subtle. They are moving a piece on the board. And when you automatically say yes, you confirm your position. But the real revelation happens when you break the script. When you say, no, not aggressively, not emotionally, just calm, neutral, controlled. No, I can't do that right now. And then you watch. Because in that exact moment, the mask glitches. A healthy person processes it instantly. No problem. They adjust. They move on. Their identity is intact. But a person with a corrupted character, they experience something deeper, a disruption, because in their mind, you were never supposed to refuse. You were an extension, a tool, a limb, and limbs don't say no. So when you do, their system short-circuits. It happens fast, less than a second. The smile freezes. The eyes lose warmth. A flicker of irritation, sometimes even rage, leaks through before the mask snaps back into place. This is what psychologists call micro-expression. But you don't need a degree to see it. You just need to stop listening and start observing. They will recover quickly. They'll say, "Oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it." But something has already been revealed. You saw the truth before they could hide it. And here's why this matters more than anything else. If someone cannot handle a small no, they will never respect a big one. If they react internally to you refusing a coffee, what do you think happens when you refuse their expectations? Their demands? Their control? They don't negotiate. They escalate. Because to them, your independence is not a boundary. It's a threat. The micro-denial exposes something most people never detect. Entitlement. It shows you that their kindness was conditional, that their respect was rented. And the moment you stop paying with obedience, the contract is broken. So here is your task. Not next week, not someday, tomorrow. Find a moment, a small one. Pick someone who feels slightly off. Someone too smooth, too agreeable, too perfect. Wait for the request, and then deny it. Calmly, cleanly, without over-explaining. And then watch their face like your safety depends on it. Because it does. If you see confusion, that's normal. If you see disappointment, that's human. But if you feel the temperature drop, if something in your gut tightens, if their eyes harden for just a fraction of a second, you are not dealing with a friend. You are dealing with someone who just lost control. And people who crave control do not forgive those who take it away. But control is only the surface. Because a person can hide their need for power. They can suppress it, mask it, reframe it. What they cannot hide is how they react to your success. And that is where the mask doesn't just slip, it cracks. Number 2, the silent funeral, the envy audit. If the first test reveals their need for control, this one reveals their heart, or more precisely, the absence of it. You've been taught a comforting lie, that real friends show up when you're struggling. That loyalty is measured by who stands beside you in hard times. And yes, that's partially true. But here's the part no one tells you. It is easy to stand next to someone who is suffering. There is no threat there. There is no comparison. There is no risk. In fact, your pain can make them feel stronger, smarter, superior. They get to play the hero. They get to console you. They get to look down without looking cruel. But your success? That's different. Your success is a mirror. And most people hate what they see in it. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that human beings are not just social creatures. They are competitive creatures. Every room has a hierarchy. Every relationship has a silent scoreboard. And when you win, you shift that balance. So here is the test. Simple, clean, brutal. You share good news. Not casually, not apologetically. You own it. I got the deal. I got the promotion. I finally made it happen. And then you stop talking. You don't fill the silence. You don't explain. You don't soften it to protect their ego. You just watch. Because in that frozen second, the truth leaks out, not through their words, but through the delay before them. A real friend reacts instantly. Energy rises, eyes light up. The emotion is congruent. There is no calculation, but someone who envies you, they lag, just for a fraction of a second. Their brain needs time to process the threat before performing the script. And in that gap, you see it. The eyes don't match the smile. The excitement feels forced. The energy feels off. Then comes the compensation. Oh wow, that's amazing. But yeah, I mean, you got lucky. That reminds me of when they redirect, they dilute, they poison the moment just enough to regain psychological balance. This is what I call the silent funeral. Because while they are smiling in front of you, internally they are mourning. Not for you, for themselves. Your success just exposed their stagnation. Your growth just highlighted their weakness. And instead of rising, they resent you for it. This is not insecurity. This is something darker. Because a person who cannot celebrate your success is not neutral. They are dangerous. They are a future saboteur. They won't attack you directly. No, they will wait. They will smile. They will stay close enough to observe your next move. And when you stumble, that's when they come alive. That's when the energy returns. That's when they offer help, not to lift you up, but to keep you exactly where they need you, below them. This is why this test is lethal, because it exposes intent, not what they say, not how they act in comfort, but what they feel when you rise. And here is the move. You do not confront them. You do not accuse them. That would be emotional, predictable, weak. Instead, you disappear, not physically, strategically. You stop sharing wins. You stop feeding them your growth. You become neutral, gray. And then you run one final experiment. You tell them something is going wrong, something small, something believable. I've been struggling lately. Things haven't been working out. And watch. Watch how fast their energy returns. Watch how engaged they suddenly become. Watch how alive they feel again. Because now, the balance has been restored. Now, you are safe to them again. And that confirms everything. They were never your ally. They were your competitor. You just didn't know you were playing a game. But envy is still an internal emotion. It happens beneath the surface, hidden, masked, controlled. The next revelation, it doesn't hide, it doesn't pretend. It shows you exactly who someone is. The moment they believe there are no consequences. Number 3, the impunity factor, who they become when nothing can stop them. The first test showed you their reaction to losing control. The second exposed how they feel when you rise. This one removes the mask completely, because it answers the only question that actually matters. Who are they when there are no consequences? People love to judge character based on how someone treats them, how polite they are, how respectful they seem, how well they perform when the spotlight is on. But that's a beginner's mistake, because anyone can behave when they are being watched. Anyone can act decent when there is something to lose. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this at a level most people will never reach. He believed that morality is often not a choice. It is a constraint. People are good because they have to be, because there are rules, because there are consequences, because there is something at stake. So, what happens? When you remove all of that, that is where the truth lives. There is a concept often repeated in leadership circles. If you want to test a man's character, give him power. But you don't need to make someone a king to see this. You just need to catch them in a moment, where they believe they are untouchable, invisible, above consequence. It happens more often than you think. When they speak to a waiter, when they deal with customer service, when they sit behind the wheel of a car, when they interact with someone who cannot fight back. In those moments, they hold the advantage, and that is when the shadow comes out. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in subtle, controlled ways. A sharp tone, a dismissive gesture, an unnecessary delay, a quiet enjoyment of someone else's discomfort. This is not stress. This is not a bad day. This is permission. Permission to be who they really are. Because in that moment, they believe no one can punish them for it. And that belief is everything. Because it reveals a truth most people are too naive to accept. Character is not what someone does when they have to be good. Character is what they do when they are free to be cruel. Watch closely. Do they escalate when they have power, or do they regulate? Do they dominate, or do they restrain? Do they use their advantage to elevate, or to diminish? Because power doesn't corrupt. Power exposes. It strips away the performance and reveals the operating system underneath. And if that system is built on control, ego, and quiet aggression, then, sooner or later, you will be on the receiving end of it. Right now, maybe they treat you well. Maybe they respect you. Maybe they even admire you. But that's only because the dynamic is balanced. Or worse, because you are still above them. The moment that changes, the moment you become vulnerable, dependent, or lower in status, they will not hesitate. They will treat you exactly the way they treat those beneath them. Because character does not shift with context. It reveals itself through it. This is why you never judge a person by how they treat their equals. You judge them by how they treat those who cannot benefit them, those who cannot resist them, those who cannot harm them. Because to a predator, everyone eventually becomes prey, even you. So here is the final calibration. If you see one of these signs, be aware. If you see two, be cautious. But if you see all three, you are not in a relationship. You are in a cage. And just because the door hasn't closed yet, doesn't mean it won't. Because predators don't change. They wait. They adapt. And when the moment comes, they act. So don't wait for the attack. See it early. And walk away while you still can. Now pause. Take a breath. Because up until this point, everything has felt good, hasn't it? You've been analyzing. You've been identifying. You've been silently naming people in your life. Your boss. Your ex. That friend who never quite felt right. It feels powerful to finally see. To hold the magnifying glass and dissect the flaws of others. To realize you were right all along. But this is where most people stop. And that is exactly why they never evolve. Because everything you've just learned was never meant to be used only outward. It was meant to be turned inward. And this is the part where most people look away. Because it's uncomfortable. It's easier to spot the predator in others than to recognize the shadow within yourself. But if you want real power, control, clarity, immunity, you don't get to skip this step. Niccolo Machiavelli never wrote for the naive. He wrote for those willing to face reality without flinching. And here is that reality. You have done these things. Maybe not constantly, maybe not consciously, but you have felt it. That flash of irritation when someone told you no. That subtle sting when someone succeeded where you didn't. That moment where you took your frustration out on someone who couldn't push back. If your first instinct is to deny it, that's your ego speaking. And your ego is the very thing being dissected right now. Because the most dangerous person in any room is not the manipulator. It's the one who believes they are incapable of becoming one. We all have a shadow. That part of you that wants control, That part of you that compares. That part of you that enjoys power just a little too much. The difference is simple. The average person is controlled by it. The dangerous one controls it. This is what separates the sheep from the sovereign. The sheep reacts. The sovereign observes. So now, instead of scanning the room, you turn the lens inward. You audit yourself with the same cold precision. No excuse. No emotional cushioning. No self-deception. When someone tells you no, what happens inside you? Be honest. Do you feel calm or do you feel resistance? When someone wins, truly wins, do you feel inspired or do you feel threatened? When you hold power, even a small amount, do you become disciplined or do you indulge it? These are your answers. Not what you say, not what you believe, but what you feel in those micro moments. Because character is not built in grand gestures. It is revealed in fragments. And if you ignore those fragments, you become the very thing you claim to avoid. This is not about guilt. Guilt is useless. It drains energy without creating change. This is about awareness, calibration, control. Because if you cannot master your own reactions, you will always be vulnerable to someone who has. So before you cut people off, before you label others as toxic, before you step into this new level of perception, you fix your own foundation. You eliminate the cracks in your own system. Because in the world you're stepping into now, real recognizes real. And the same instincts you use to detect weakness in others will be used against you. So the question is no longer, who around you is dangerous? The real question is, are you predictable or are you in control? Good. Now we don't observe anymore. We correct. Because seeing the pattern without mastering it makes you vulnerable in a different way. So we go back to the 3 revelations. But this time, we flip them. We turn them into weapons of control. First, mastering the no, the sovereign response. When someone tells you no, that is your test, not theirs. Your ego will react first. It always does. A small irritation, a quiet resistance, a voice that whispers, "Why not me?" That voice is weakness. That voice is dependency. And if you don't control it, others will. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that power belongs to those who are not emotionally controlled by outcomes. So here is the discipline. The next time you are denied, you do nothing. No reaction. No persuasion. No subtle pressure. You accept. Cleanly. I understand. And you mean it. Because a man who is unaffected by rejection signals something rare. Option. Control. Abundance. Desperation is loud. Detachment is silent. And silence commands respect. Practice this until your nervous system stops reacting, until no becomes neutral. Because once you reach that state, no one can manipulate you through approval again. Second, mastering envy, the alchemist mindset. Envy is dangerous, not because it exists, but because most people deny it. They suppress it, hide it, let it rot internally, and that rot turns into sabotage, quiet resentment, passive aggression, the silent funeral. But here is the truth. Envy is not the problem. Misused envy is. Envy is energy, raw, volatile, directional energy. And you have 2 choices: project it outward or convert it inward. When someone succeeds and you feel that tension in your chest, that is your signal, not to hate them, but to study them. Instead of thinking, why them? You shift to, how did they do it? You move closer. You observe patterns, habits, decisions, because success leaves clues. And if you reject the person, You reject the blueprint. Niccolo Machiavelli played both sides of human nature. He warned against enemies, but he also knew proximity creates leverage. So, instead of becoming the silent saboteur, you become the strategic ally. You convert envy into data, into fuel, into direction. And that shift alone separates those who stay stuck from those who rise. Third, mastering power, the controlled predator. This is the final form, because anyone can act disciplined without power. Very few can hold power and stay disciplined. When you have the advantage, that is when your real character is forged, not tested. Forged. Because power amplifies what is already inside you. If you are unstable, you become cruel. If you are insecure, you become controlling. If you are weak, you become loud. But if you are controlled, you become dangerous in a different way. Silent, precisi, unpredictable. The next time you are in a position of power, even something small, you slow down. You observe your impulses. The urge to dominate, to interrupt, to correct, to assert. And you don't act on them immediately. You choose, deliberately, because restraint is the highest form of dominance. Anyone can press down, very few can hold back. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this paradox. Fear creates obedience, but controlled behavior creates lasting authority. So instead of using power to prove yourself, you use it to stabilize the environment. You treat the lowest person in the room the same way you treat the highest. Not out of kindness, out of strategy. Because consistency builds reputation, and reputation builds invisible power. So where does this leave you? Simpler. You are no longer reacting. You are calibrating. Every no becomes a test of your ego. Every success of others becomes a map. Every moment of power becomes a decision point. And if you master all three, you become something rare. Someone who cannot be easily read, cannot be easily manipulated, cannot be easily replaced. Because you are no longer driven by impulse. You are driven by control. And in a world full of emotional actors, control is power. So where does this leave you? Not with comfort, not with reassurance, but with a choice. Because now, you see the micro-denial. You see the silent funeral. You see the impunity factor. You walk into a room and it's no longer noise. It's patterns. It's signals. It's a map of power, intention, and hidden motives. And once you see it, you cannot go back. You cannot unsee the hesitation in someone's smile. You cannot ignore the cold shift in their eyes. You cannot pretend that everyone around you has good intentions. That version of you, the naive one, is gone. Niccolo Machiavelli never wrote for the comfort of the masses. He wrote for the few who were willing to trade illusion for control. And that trade always comes with a cost. Because the moment you start seeing clearly, you start separating. You talk less. You trust slower. You observe more than you react. And people will notice. They will say you've changed. They will call you distant, cold, different. They will try to pull you back into the old version of yourself. The version that was easier to read, easier to influence, easier to control. This is your final test. Not spotting the manipulator, not understanding the game, but standing your ground when the world tries to drag you back into ignorance. Because there are only two paths from here. You go back to comfort. You ignore what you've seen. You laugh it off. You keep everyone close, hoping for the best. And you stay predictable, safe, easy to read, easy to play. Or you step into clarity. You become selective, intentional, unavailable to those who drain, manipulate, or compete in silence. Yes, it gets quieter. Yes, It gets lonelier, but it also gets cleaner, sharper, real. Because when you remove the noise, you finally start seeing who actually belongs in your world. Not the ones who need you weak, not the ones who compete with your growth, not the ones who change when they gain power, but the rare ones who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your wins, who remain consistent regardless of position. They exist, but you will never find them if your life is crowded with the wrong ones. So this is where you decide: stay with the herd, or walk alone long enough to become something else. Something harder to manipulate, something harder to break, something sovereign. Now understand this. If this opened your eyes, this is only what I can show publicly. There are layers to this, deeper strategies, darker mechanics of influence and defense that cannot be discussed openly. Not because they don't exist, but because platforms are not built to spread this level of awareness. The algorithm protects comfort. It suppresses power. There are concepts, real ones, about psychological warfare, social dominance, and silent control that I cannot break down here without limitation. Those exist behind the join button. If you're still here, it means you're not like most people. Most people hear this and go back to sleep. But if you want to go further, if you want to stop just spotting manipulation and start dismantling it, then you already know where to go. Subscribe if you haven't. But if you want access to what's hidden, click the join button and step into the architect level. That's where we stop observing and start building control. Most won't. That's the point. I'll see you in the dark.